In a beautiful house in the suburbs, there lives a rich family, the Millers. Mr. Miller sells diamonds for a living and makes lots of money. He shares his big home with his wife and their teenage daughter, Lily. These days, Mr. Miller is always working. One evening, something special happens. He comes home on time. Mrs. Miller gets really happy. She puts on her best dress and cooks a wonderful dinner. But then Mr. Miller says something that makes her sad. Sorry, I have to go to another business meeting. He tries to make her feel better by saying, I'm working hard for our family. Just as Mr. Miller is about to leave, the doorbell rings. Someone talks through the camera at their gate saying they're a police officer. They tell the Millers there's been a break-in nearby and need to talk to them. Mr. Miller sees a police badge and thinks everything is okay, so he opens the gate. He asks his wife to get Lily from her room, but Lily is angry at her parents because they said no to a party at her rich friend's house. When Mrs. Miller knocks on Lily's door, nobody answers. She uses a spare key to open it and finds out Lily has run away. Then something scary happens. Mr. Miller yells at his wife to run. The police officers aren't real police at all. They're actually 4 robbers, 3 men and 1 woman, wearing fake uniforms. They quickly grab Mr. and Mrs. Miller, break all their phones, and force them into Mr. Miller's study room. Inside the study, the robbers find something interesting, a safe hidden behind a painting on the wall. They turn to Mr. Miller and demand him to tell them the secret code. They know there are expensive diamonds inside. The leader of the robbers threatens to hurt Mrs. Miller if her husband doesn't help them. But Mr. Miller stays very calm. He tells them something they didn't know. All real diamonds have special marks on them. He explains that these marks show who owns the diamond, how much it weighs, and what shape it is. If you steal them, he says, nobody will want to buy them because they're easy to track. Then Mr. Miller makes a surprising offer. He suggests they work together. His plan is clever. They can pretend there was a robbery, get money from the insurance company, and he can remove the special marks from the diamonds. This way, everyone gets what they want, and nobody gets hurt. The leader starts thinking about this idea, but suddenly one of the younger robbers speaks up. He's just trying to trick us, he says. This robber claims he saw Mr. Miller get a package with diamonds and lots of cash recently. He thinks they should forget about the diamonds and just take the money. At this moment, Mrs. Miller realizes something scary. She knows who this young robber is. She remembers his voice and the way he moves. He's the same good-looking man who came to fix their security system not long ago. Now she understands how the robbers knew so much about their house. She decides to stay quiet, worried they might hurt her if they know she recognized him. The robbers keep trying to get the safe code from Mr. Miller, but he won't tell them. He thinks that as long as they don't have the code, he and his wife will stay safe. Getting angry, the leader pulls out a needle with medicine that makes people sleep. We just want money, the leader says, not to hurt anyone. You'll wake up when we're done. Mr. Miller still won't help the robbers unless they free his wife. Then something scary happens. One of the angry robbers puts a knife against Mrs. Miller's neck and threatens to kill her. Mr. Miller is terrified. The young robber, the one who fixed their security system, suddenly points his gun at the man with the knife. Why? Because he has feelings for Mrs. Miller and can't watch her get hurt. Now everyone is pointing weapons at each other. To stop the fighting, the leader, who turns out to be the young robber's big brother, takes Mrs. Miller to the kitchen. He knows something interesting. His younger brother and Mrs. Miller have been secretly flirting. The leader uses this secret to make Mrs. Miller help them. He tells her to convince her husband to open the safe. She says yes, but she's clever. While no one is looking, she takes the sleep medicine needle from the leader's pocket. Just then, they hear something that makes everyone freeze. A voice calls out from the living room. It's Lily! Mrs. Miller yells at her daughter to run away, but the robbers are too quick and catch her. Poor Lily has her own story to tell. She went to that party she wasn't allowed to go to, but it wasn't fun at all. The rich kid hosting it was using drugs and wanted Lily to join him. Lily didn't like this at all, so she left the party early and came home through the back door. But coming home wasn't safe either. She walked right into the middle of the robbery. Now the robbers have all 3 family members together. They start trying to use the family's feelings against each other to get what they want. The leader of the robbers starts telling a sad story. He says he has a mother who is very sick and needs a new kidney. The operation costs $180,000, and his mother's father was very mean to her. That's why he says he's robbing the Millers. Then he says something terrible. If Mr. Miller doesn't open the safe, he'll take one of Lily's kidneys. This threat about her daughter makes Mrs. Miller very angry. Quick as lightning, she grabs the leader by the neck and pulls out the sleep medicine needle she took earlier. She remembers what the leader said. This much medicine could kill someone if they get all of it at once. Let my daughter go, she tells the other robbers, or I'll hurt your leader. The robbers have to let Lily go, but they don't give up. They tell Mr. Miller they'll bring Lily back if he doesn't open the safe. Mrs. Miller starts crying and begs her husband to just open it. Finally, Mr. Miller agrees. But when the safe opens, everyone gets a big surprise. It's empty. Mr. Miller then tells them a shocking truth. He lost his job, he has no money, and the bank is going to take their house away because they can't pay for it anymore. Those diamonds and money the robbers saw him with, they weren't his. He just gets a small payment for helping sell other people's diamonds. The robbers don't believe him. They bring Lily back. After all, their house is so far from other houses that she can't run away to get help. Then the young robber remembers something. Mr. Miller's special silver suitcase. They open it, but find only papers about diamonds, not money. This makes the leader very angry. He starts hitting Mr. Miller and again threatens to hurt Lily. Mr. Miller begs them to stop, saying, "Take my kidney instead, just don't hurt my daughter." The leader gets very angry and pushes Mr. Miller down with a knife. Mr. Miller doesn't fight back at all. This makes the leader stop and think. Then we learn something surprising. The leader's story about his sick mother was all made up. His mother actually died years ago from drinking too much. He only told that sad story to make Mr. Miller feel sorry for him. Since they can't get anything from Mr. Miller, the robbers look around the house for valuable things. They find a photo of Mrs. Miller wearing a beautiful diamond necklace. They tie up Mr. Miller and Lily, then force Mrs. Miller to show them where the necklace is. While everyone is busy looking for the necklace, Mr. Miller and Lily try to escape. They find a lighter and try to burn the tape around their hands. The robbers find the necklace, but nothing else worth taking. Then they do something scary. They take off their masks, which means they don't plan to let the family see them and live. Mrs. Miller knows they're in big trouble, so she whispers something to the young robber who likes her. "If you save Lily, I'll do anything you want." The young robber, who is still in love with Mrs. Miller, quickly runs to his brother, the leader, to beg for her life. The leader wants his brother to be happy, so he makes a terrible plan. He tells the woman robber to take Lily to a bedroom. Then he decides to kill Mr. Miller in front of his wife, thinking this will make Mrs. Miller so sad and broken that she'll go away with his brother. Just when things look really bad, Mr. Miller shares another surprising secret. Mrs. Miller's beautiful necklace is fake. He had to sell the real one to pay their bills. "Real diamonds are very hard," he tells them. "If you hit this necklace, you'll see it's not real." The leader tests it and crack, the necklace breaks into pieces. This makes the leader completely lose control. He tells Mr. Miller his own secret. He and the woman robber sell drugs. A few days ago, someone stole $180,000 worth of their drugs. Now, a dangerous mafia boss wants his money back, or he'll kill them both. The scary robber with the knife, he works for the mafia boss and is there to watch them. The leader is desperate now. "If we don't get money from you," he tells Mr. Miller, "we'll all die together." But Mr. Miller still says he has no money. Then something shocking happens. The woman robber finds a photo in Mr. Miller's suitcase. It shows the young robber kissing Mrs. Miller. Now everyone understands. Mr. Miller already knew about his wife's secret relationship. Maybe that's why he doesn't care what happens anymore. Right then, the mafia boss calls again, asking for his money. This makes the leader so angry that he starts hurting Mr. Miller. Mrs. Miller runs to protect her husband, but gets knocked down. The young robber sees the woman he loves getting hurt and rushes to help her. He's so angry at his brother now. The leader faces his brother, and things get really tense. The young robber seems to be losing control. His brother's words make him so upset that he almost starts fighting him. Suddenly, the doorbell rings. It's a security guard. He's there because their alarm went off earlier. Even though the robbers turned it off, the security company needs the house owner to sign a paper saying everything is okay. If they don't get this signature, they'll have to call the police. The leader thinks fast and pretends to be Mr. Miller, but then something terrible happens. The young robber, who isn't thinking straight, follows his brother outside and shoots the security guard. He grabs the guard's radio and lies to the security company, telling them everything is fine. The leader can see his brother is losing control. He decides they should kill Mr. Miller and leave right away, but before he can do anything, Lily speaks up with a surprising offer. "I can help you get money if you don't hurt my dad," she says. She tells them about the rich kid from the party. He has more than $200,000 in his house safe. The leader, feeling desperate, jumps at this chance. He sends the woman robber with Lily to get the money. The young robber stays behind, trying to convince Mrs. Miller to run away with him after everything is done. "I'll take good care of you and Lily," he promises. But Lily has a clever and brave plan. While they're driving to the rich kid's house, she quietly unbuckles the woman robber's seatbelt. Then she does something very dangerous. She crashes the car into a pole on purpose. The woman robber dies in the crash. Lily gets hurt, but not too badly. She manages to get the dead robber's gun. The drama at the house takes a new turn when the violent robber wakes up from being knocked out. He sees the young robber trying to take Mrs. Miller away and rushes to stop him. Even though the young robber has mental problems, he fights back hard, but the violent robber is stronger and starts choking him. The leader sees this happening and quickly shoots the violent robber in the neck, killing him. But before dying, the violent robber tells everyone something shocking. The masked people who stole $180,000 worth of stuff earlier weren't random thieves. They were actually the mafia boss and the young robber. It turns out the young robber had planned everything from the start. His real plan was to push his brother into a corner, making him rob Mr. Miller's house. Why? Because he was in love with Mrs. Miller and wanted to win her heart. When his secret comes out, the young robber tries to explain himself. But Mr. and Mrs. Miller see their chance to escape and run to hide. Mr. Miller is hurt and tells his wife to run and get the police. But just as Mrs. Miller tries to leave, the robber leader stops her. The young robber runs after them, and soon he's fighting with his brother. During their fight, they knock over a wall panel, and something unexpected falls out: piles of cash. Everyone realizes Mr. Miller had been hiding a lot of money there. Seeing all this money, the leader decides he wants to kill Mr. Miller and take it all. But right then, Lily comes back. The leader figures out that the female robber must be dead, so he points his gun at Lily instead. In a surprise twist, the young robber suddenly seems to think clearly for a moment. He shoots his own brother to save Lily's life. While Lily stands there shocked and confused, the young robber grabs her gun. He tries one more time to convince Mrs. Miller to run away with him. He tells her that Mr. Miller hid all this money because he knew about their secret relationship and was planning to divorce her. The truth finally comes out, and it changes everything. Mrs. Miller learns that her husband wasn't hiding money to leave her. He was saving it for their family after selling the necklace. The real shock comes when they discover what the young robber did. At his job, he had stolen videos of Mrs. Miller and used them to trick Mr. Miller into thinking she was cheating on him. All this time, Mr. Miller had been hurting inside but never said anything to his wife. After learning all this, Mr. Miller makes a brave choice. He finds a lighter and sets all the money on fire, hoping this will give his family a chance to run away. As the flames grow bigger, the young robber tries to save some of the burning money. Mr. Miller sees his chance and uses a nail gun to shoot the robber's foot, pinning him to the floor. The young robber gets very angry and points his gun at Mr. Miller, ready to kill him, but Mrs. Miller shows how much she loves her husband by jumping in front of him to protect him. Seeing this, the young robber feels lost. He lowers his gun and tries to hug Mrs. Miller one last time, but Mr. Miller grabs the gun and shoots him, killing him. With the danger finally over, Mr. and Mrs. Miller help each other escape from the fire. Outside, their family holds each other tight, so grateful to be alive. The money might be nothing but ashes now, but they don't care anymore. They have each other, and that's what matters most.